Welcome back. It's Vincent here with YMHA. Tonight I am joined by Joe, who is here to talk to us a little bit about his story. One of the things that came to mind that actually was brought to my attention by a follower was addiction and how we can help support without enabling. Because I think a lot of people, myself included, we don't think of addiction as a mental health issue. We just think of it as it's an addiction problem, right? Whether it's drugs, substance abuse of any kind, alcohol abuse. So Joe is here to share a little bit about his story with us tonight, and then we're going to invite Joe back in another video, our next video actually. It's going to be a two-part segment on treatment and support. So Joe, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy that you joined us. Thanks for coming on and taking a few minutes of your time tonight. We know everybody's having some crazy lives, especially with COVID going on. So, I know that we were connected by a mutual friend to talk about addiction. Now, you had shared with me a little bit that you yourself had struggled with addiction, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So, as much or as little as you want to share, your struggle with addiction. Number one, if you don't mind sharing with us, what did you, whether you want to be general or specific is fine, did you happen to struggle with? Was it substance abuse, alcohol?
It was a dual diagnosis, so substance abuse as well as mental health. I'm pretty much what you call a dumpster addict. So pretty much anything I could get my hands on to take me out of my element, I would do. My go-to was heroin. Heroin and crack cocaine were like always my go-to, my first pick. But I mean, I would never turn my nose away to any type of substance that I came across.
Okay. Now, when you say that dumpster addict, so like you said, you're not going to turn away from anything you come. Was it just because you were looking for that next high, or to try to beat that next high?
I mean, yeah, it was a combination of everything. It was always in search of that next high, that next rush, as well as my final time in treatment, as we're going to talk about, next week, and more of like the recovery aspect of things and the other side. I didn't recognize the fact that I struggled with mental health issues. Like I knew I had some minor anxiety and depression, but there's a lot more deep rooted issues that go on internally inside the mind and physiology of an addict that I didn't recognize were actually going on. So it was me not wanting to deal with my own personal emotions and feelings and things that I knew I needed to deal with, so I used drugs and alcohol to kind of numb that,
All right. So let me ask then, and again, as little or as much as you want to share and you're willing to share, you went through your struggles, your ups and downs, right? The highs and lows. You were looking for that next high. At what point did you realize, was it a combination of whether it was an intervention from other people? Was it you just waking up one morning and saying, oh my gosh, I have this problem? What really kind of snapped you, or, kind of hit you, for lack of a better phrase, hit you in the face of, I have a problem?
One situation in particular, and I didn't want to kill myself.
Okay.
But I had a thought that I was comfortable knowing that if the next time I put a needle in my arm was the last time, I was fine with it. And even in active addiction, I knew that there was something wrong with that way of thinking.
Okay.
And even then, it was still like about a month or 2 months later until I actually got clean. And it was actually a spiritual experience that brought me down to Florida, where I live now. A little bit over 6 years ago. And just to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, I remember just sitting in the car. I was working a dead-end construction job in downtown Cleveland, sitting in a parking garage facing a church. And no thought, I would just was about at that point where I was just so tired of waking up every single day, feeling the way that I was feeling, not knowing how I was going to come up with money to get high, knowing that if I didn't get high, or I didn't put some type of substance in my body, I wasn't going to be able to make it through the day. And I was sitting there, and as crazy as it sounds, an audible voice in my head says, this is not a way to live. I have a way out. And I immediately broke down, started crying, to the point where I could not compose myself. My boss came walking up to my car. He gave me the day off. He didn't know what was going on. I started calling different places, and I checked myself into like a local mental health place in Ohio. But yeah, it all just stemmed from that realization a month or two prior that, I was okay with dying. and it's just crazy how, like, even in active addiction, there was obviously pulling something inside of me towards getting clean, because most people don't make that type of recognition in regards to the thought processes when you're in active addiction. So I wholeheartedly believe the person that I am today and doing the things that I do is because this was my intended purpose. This is what God had pulled me into.
Okay. So you say spiritual, and you say, it's kind of a spiritual thought and revelation, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, right? That you realize even when you were using, you just got comfortable with the idea if this is the last time and I don't wake up, you kind of had that epiphany, right? That this isn't right. I can't do this anymore. It took about a month, like you said. During that time, you had just mentioned that you knew that you weren't going to be able to function if you didn't have that high. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you hear people talk about being a functioning alcoholic or a functioning addict. Just a little synopsis, if you would. What is as far as the mental state and your thought process as a functioning addict, how does your day look? How did it differ then versus now that you're sober?
Oh gosh, it's night and day. I mean, my first thought when I would wake up in the morning, that's if I was even able to sleep throughout the night, if I was able to get enough dope the day before to actually get a night's sleep, was how am I gonna make it through work? Because working in construction and being dope sick, especially the job that I was doing at the time, I was doing drywall, and you're lifting up 150, 200 pound pieces of drywall over your head for 8 to 10 hours a day. I mean, doing that while your body feels like it's falling apart is just not an easy task. I mean, now I'm up before my alarm goes off most days. Energy, and excited and ready to go to work, and just ready to tackle the day. And, just recognizing that what I put into today, it's later on down the line, it's going to manifest in some aspect or another. I didn't have that way of thinking before. It was literally a minute by minute survival when I was in addiction.
If you survive and you wake up the next day, great. If not, then you were comfortable knowing that was it.
Yes, and it's every day is just, how am I going to make it through today? How am I going to make it through the next 5 minutes? Oh my gosh, I don't even know I can't even make it 5 minutes from now feeling the way that I'm feeling. And then your brain goes to, who can I steal from? What can I sell? Just the place drugs takes your mind is just absolutely
anything and everything.
It's wild. Yeah, it's wild.
So now that you've been sober for how long now?
I celebrated 6 years on October 23rd.
Oh, wow. So congratulations. That is a long time. I'm a big believer in, you celebrate small wins, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year, 5 years, whatever. 6 years is a very long time. So congratulations on that. We're happy for you here. I think that the one thing that everybody forgets, and you touched on it, right? You became very comfortable knowing that if I die, I die. Didn't have the suicidal tendency. But have you seen, or other addicts, do you believe, or is there a sense that maybe they do have those suicidal tendencies or those thoughts?
There are, and that's the difficult part in regards to substance abuse and mental health, is even though we're all the same, we're all drastically different. I mean, and that's another thing that we're going to touch base on next week, is just the fact that, like, you and me both can struggle with the same substance and be on two completely different types of tracks and protocol in an inpatient treatment program, because what you respond to may not necessarily work for me and vice versa. So it's kind of that dynamic of, yes, I didn't have those suicidal tendencies, but other people do. And then there are people like me that don't want to kill themselves, but they have those just daily thoughts of, like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore, which in my opinion is not a suicidal ideation. The suicidal ideation is when you're actively thinking about, I want to kill myself. So there are those differences. There are people that do have severe mental health issues that are undiagnosed. And then there's people like me who have just like the generic anxiety, like social anxiety and depression and stuff like that. Like, I was lucky enough to not have to deal with anything too severe, like schizoaffective disorder and stuff like that.
All right. So then you pulled yourself out, here you are about 6.5 years later, sober. One thing that I've always heard, I know people that, I've seen people struggle with addiction. I've seen it tear families apart in relationships. The one thing that they've always told me when they become sober is they're always recovering. There's no such thing as fully recovered addicts. Do you tend to agree with that statement? If not, why not? If yes, then, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question, especially
Okay.
if you're in a meeting. I think you'll get a 50-50 down the room of people that are like, I'm recovered, and then people that are like, no, I'm always recovering. Okay. For me, I think it's a daily reprieve, because it's just one of those things where I got high daily, so I have to recover daily. And that's where a lot of people kind of think is I put in a lot of work to get high, and I got to put a lot of work to get sober. And if I stop putting the work in, then I'm going to end up right back where I was before.
So did you ever try to get sober before this, now 6.5 years later, or was it just constant? I'm looking for that high.
No, I tried. This was actually my 7th time in a facility when I came down to Florida. Every other time was local. So I always stuck local somewhere within, an hour and a half or closer in Ohio. Okay. And it was as simple as having a bad day, which we have in treatment, not wanting to follow through and just making a phone call and leaving.
Right.
I didn't have that option coming to Florida. And I knew if I was going to give this an honest try, then I had to get out of my area, and I had to put some separation between the people that I knew and the places that I had been, that I had bad memories, and where I was going to receive, some help.
So it sounds like no regrets. You're 6.5 years sober. It's a big accomplishment, a huge milestone for anybody. Again, for me, small accomplishments, 30 days, or, whether it's, larger ones and longer ones of 6 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. Sounds like there were no regrets. Like you may have missed that and missed the people that you knew, but for you, getting clean and being sober were more important to you, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing that I love about recovery, is the fact that I have a little bit over 6 years now, and the newcomer that's coming in with a couple hours sober, we're the same person.
Right.
I know what it was like to have that first 24 hours. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've made it a day.
Right.
And that's the great aspect of it, is that like time isn't what matters. It's what we put into it, whether that's a 24-hour window or a 6.5-year window. It doesn't make a difference between the time.
Right. And I think, so correct me if you disagree, if you think I'm wrong, please. Something I read was, whenever you're recovering, whatever it is, whether it's addiction, whether substance abuse, drug abuse, whatever it may be, right? Any mental health, the key is you're gonna fall sometimes, right? We know that's part of life. But the key is you have to be able to get back up and not necessarily start over, but remember why you started and continue moving forward to better yourself, whether it's mentally, physically, with the substance abuse or alcohol abuse. I think that's a big thing that people forget, that they think that once they, for lack of a better word, fail, quote unquote, fail, is they have to start from the very beginning, and that they aren't going to be able to do it again. So you said it's been a few times. This time worked. 6.5 years, here we are. One final thought from you, if you would. If there's anybody out there struggling with substance abuse, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever, or need help, what is your one piece of wisdom, your one piece of advice you would give those people?
Open your mouth and talk about it, whether you feel like you're capable of achieving it or not, because the majority of us don't, especially in active addiction. We've been doing drugs for so long that we can't envision ourselves doing anything other than being high. So the idea and the concept of being sober, just it's very hard to grasp. Be transparent, talk with somebody, share the fact that you think maybe you have a problem, but you don't think you can recover from it. Be transparent, because the only way somebody can honestly help you is by being completely honest.
Right.
And that would be my biggest piece of advice. That's what I tell people on the phone with the job that I work at. And in closing, like you were talking about, I totally agree with everything that you just said. Right. And I'm a firm believer that relapse is definitely a part of recovery. It doesn't have to be, but it is. And it's only a failure, in my opinion, if you choose to do nothing with the relapse. If you choose to learn something about yourself in regards to why you relapsed and use that to get sober again, that's what it's about. Okay, not how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up.
Right. And that's the key to success, right? You got to get up every time you fall. So, you know, with the job you're doing, so Joe, you shared a lot with us and I appreciate all that. And our viewers, you know, I hope you guys take something away from this. I do agree with Joe. You got to be transparent. You got to talk to somebody. So what we're going to do is, Joe, we're going to have you back. We're going to do part 2 with you, talk about a little bit with what you're doing now. So you were able to speak to us on the side from an addict's point of view. And so next week in our next episode with Joe, he's going to talk about from a treatment side of what he's been able to experience and some of his best tips and tricks to help support an addict, whether it's a friend or a family member, but not enable them. So in closing, guys, thanks. We appreciate your time, Joe. Thank you for joining us. It's very informative and always great to have new people on to share their stories. So thank you again. Guys, you know where to find us. You can hit us up on our Facebook page, YMHA. Also find us on Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel. Joe, thanks again. Have a wonderful evening, guys. We'll see everybody soon.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.